Hey there, I'm D++. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to be moderating a panel on the topic of self-sovereignty and running your own node. How many of you would consider yourselves to be self-sovereign and that you hold the own keys to your own Bitcoin? And how many of you run your own Bitcoin and or Lightning node? All right, awesome. So I'm going to be joined by not one, but 3 CEOs of not one, but 3 Bitcoin companies. These are Bitcoin-only companies, which are the best kind. And before I introduce our CEOs, just a quick blurb about me. Little personal news for you guys. I recently joined a Bitcoin company myself. The Bitcoin Company, in fact, that's our name, The Bitcoin Company. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be heading education at the Bitcoin Company. We have a product launch coming out in a couple of weeks, so please stay tuned. There's going to be some really incredible announcements. Now, before I joined the Bitcoin Company, I was working as a coding professor and a web developer with a bachelor's in computer engineering. I've since pivoted my career into Bitcoin, 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 only Bitcoin. It's all I can think about. It's all I can do, and I'm thrilled to now have a Bitcoin job. Now thank you so much. I'd love to introduce our panelists. I'm gonna be joined by 3 CEOs. Our first CEO is going to be NVK of CoinKite. A lot of CoinKite fanboys in the audience, I see. So CoinKite is famous for their cold card hardware wallet, which I'm a little biased, but it's my favorite hardware wallet. I think it's a lot to verify, but I think you'll find it may quickly become your favorite as well. We're also going to be joined by Matt Hill of Start9. Do we have any Start9 fanboys?
Yeah.
So Start9 is paving the road for the future of sovereign computing. They've developed their own operating system, the Embassy OS, which makes it easy to run your own Bitcoin and Lightning node. You can even choose your flavor of Lightning. You can choose your implementation, whether that's LND or C Lightning, which is pretty cool. You can also grab an additional device to host your data, your passwords, and even your own instance of Matrix, and have a truly secure messaging application that you run yourself. Last but not least, we're also going to be joined by Graham Krizik. Now, I've been following his company, Voltage, quite closely because they're a newer Bitcoin company and they have amassed an all-star lineup of fantastic Bitcoiners on their team. Now, Voltage offers cloud solutions for folks who need a place to park their node, and perhaps businesses that might want to have a quick and easy instance of, say, BTC Pay server spun up without having to pull out all of your hair. So we're happy to have Graham from Voltage as well. All right, I've got some questions for you all on the topic of self-sovereignty and running your own node. So what I'm thinking is, let's start with why. Why would we want to be self-sovereign, and what is the importance of self-sovereignty? And these questions, by the way, are open to everyone on the panel.
Sure. So the whole point of Bitcoin is that you can essentially run the numbers, right? You can account for the total money supply yourself without trusting anyone. You also have a copy of all the transactions to make sure that that money supply is true. And you essentially control or verify the consensus rules on the network. So the whole point of Bitcoin is for you to be fully self-sovereign with your monetary system. You know, Without that, you essentially back into a system where people can counterfeit. That's what central banks do. They run a counterfeiting operation. They debase your monetary systems, or other shitcoins do the same thing, right? They just keep on printing. I think if you ask for Ethereum's money supply, nobody knows.
I can. So I think that another important piece of it is, it's not really possible to, take control of your funds in a real sense and in any other way outside of Bitcoin. You can hold all of your net worth in cash under your mattress, but we all know fiat has problems too. And so there's really not any other technology that exists that allows you to have complete control over your assets, in its entirety. And given that you have that option in Bitcoin, why would you not exercise that option?
Yeah, so the 3 tiers of sovereignty are trust, which is kind of what most people in the world do today. And then you have trust but verify, which was a very common, saying over the more recent years. And now most recently you have don't trust, verify, meaning the number of third parties that are involved in your digital life directly correlates to the amount of risk you are introducing to your data, your privacy, and your finances. So the elimination of trusted third parties is a worthwhile endeavor, one that I think everyone here pursues. But when you extend that concept beyond just Bitcoin, it gets increasingly difficult, but it is no less important. So don't trust, verify is something that we kind of hold as an axiom at Start9 and try to help people accomplish in a very practical way.
Bitcoin is the only asset you can really own, right? There's nothing else you can actually own. Everything else requires violence, right? So that's how real estate is enforced. That's how contracts are enforced. With Bitcoin, the enforcement comes from math. So unless people can break the cryptography of it, which we would have way bigger problems than just Bitcoin, nobody can take that Bitcoin from you.
Yeah, so long as you have the keys and the gates.
So you're saying that Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system with no trusted third party?
I'm saying it can be. It doesn't have to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, not to be too dark, but speaking of violence, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of current events that I think have brought to the forefront the importance of self-sovereignty, given the trucker protest in Canada and the mandates, as well as the emerging war in Eastern Europe. So do you think that the importance of self-sovereignty is timely in an era of political unrest?
I mean, I'm based out of Canada, and it was very, very fascinating. It was a gift to see a G7 country show their cards. This is absolutely unheard of, right? You have a prime minister because there's some guys honking in front of parliament and, roasting a pig and having a nice bath. He pulls out martial law and starts freezing bank accounts. I mean, just imagine that, right? People having their bank accounts frozen without due process in Canada. Canada is supposed to be boring, right? And this happens, and the rest of the world is sort of like, I don't know how to react to this, right? Because we're going to probably do that too once the financial collapse happens, right? And my theory is that he got a call from the bankers because the money was starting to go, right? Anybody in their right mind would never bank in Canada again. But remember that this is going to probably happen in other countries too. Now, fortunately for Bitcoiners, it's like, okay, great. I don't have a problem with you like debanking people. You can't cancel me, right? It's a fascinating dynamic to see this play out. We're like memeing things into reality.
Yeah, and I think it's all of it was really horrible, but I think the positive thing that kind of came out of it was the Bitcoin community and how everyone kind of really rallied around them and helped, donate to the cause, which again kind of proved out Bitcoin's value in that kind of unconfiscatable type of money, where the funds that were being donated to the protesters were in a multi-sig address that if you break into one person's house. It can, it takes multiple people to, move the funds. And then what happened with Nunchucks or whatever that, basically wrote a letter to the Canadian government saying, we have no ability to freeze these accounts. Like, are you stupid? And that's awesome. Like, that was really cool to see. And I think that is one of the positives that has come out of this. And we've seen a big burst in people doing crowdfunding through BTC Pay Server and really trying to explore how can you get support for your cause without being subject to being canceled or having your money taken from the crowdfunding platforms that have said, oh, all of this donations that you've received you can no longer have, and we're going to put it elsewhere. So I think that's been a really exciting thing to see come out of this, is just Bitcoin's community, and it's kind of proving itself, even we all know this, but proving itself to the world of its value.
I mean, it was the talk of CPAC. I mean, like,
Yeah.
Trudeau is the Bitcoin salesman of the year. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think you're ever gonna have anything better than that. And they literally go on TV and say it.
Well, Trudeau was born in 1971. What the fuck happened in 1971?
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Yeah. Castro wants him back.
But I think through the process of attempting to distribute funds to these Canadian truckers, I think what we saw is that the importance of UX, of user experience, really cannot be understated when it comes to Bitcoin. So CoinKite has a new product that's coming out that I really am dying to know more about. It's the SATS card, which is an NFC-enabled credit card-like device that can be used to move Bitcoin. But you're not giving us a whole lot of info about it, for one. And two, would this have been an appropriate way to have distributed funds to the truckers had it already been on the market?
Yeah, so, back in the day, if you wanted to give people Bitcoin, you'd have either them set up a wallet in front of you or you make them a paper wallet. But paper wallets are inherently problematic because you can take the money back. So we created Open Dime a few years ago, and that sort of took on, but it's expensive. So we created a card. We're calling it the SETS card, and it's essentially an Open Dime with 10x reuse. And it's hopefully going to be cheap enough, and we can address physical Bitcoin transactions, which are actually untraceable. Because there is no transaction anymore. It's just a valid UTXO being transferred from person to person to person. You can even denominate them. But
Sounds like SneakerNet.
Exactly. It is SneakerNet.
When SATS card?
SATS card is actually ready. The integrations are not. So no timeline. 2 weeks, yes. It's going to ship with all the mining gear that everybody's waiting.
Before we move on, does anyone have anything else to say about just the importance of self-sovereignty given the dire political times? We haven't really covered Russia or the Ukraine yet.
Sure, without getting into the specifics of any of that, I think that the world is, as NVK mentioned, acting more and more like a marketing engine for Bitcoin and, more broadly speaking, self-sovereign technology, right? Hopefully, many in this room can admit that maybe not us specifically, but the world at large has been a bit naive in modern decades. We've gotten a bit complacent with the idea of, entrusting finances and data and lines of communication to trusted third parties, and that those trusted third parties have become increasingly consolidated and centralized, and many of the costs associated with that have been obfuscated. They haven't really been front and center. The costs are indirect, right? So every time you open up your phone and use it to send a text message, you don't really realize in that moment that you are in fact raising your hand and asking permission to communicate with the person that you are attempting to message. And that until now, the answer has always been, sure, you can do that, and sure, we'll make it free or make it cheap. But the hidden costs have been rising, and the bill is coming due. And so these world events that are, in kind of acute instances demonstrating this cost, where all of a sudden, a government steps up and just says, you're not allowed to send messages anymore. You're not allowed to transact anymore, is raising awareness, right? And these are going to increase in frequency. And so the demand for sovereignty, technical digital sovereignty, is going to rise very naturally. We don't actually need to promote it super hard. We do need to educate in parallel with the rise of demand, but I think it's almost undeniable at this point that it's needed.
The cloud is just somebody else's computer. That's right. Right? Like somebody else has admin access to that computer. And we were very fortunate that in this last ban was just bank accounts. They didn't say turn off Twitter, right? If they had turned off Twitter at the same time, we would not be being able to meme honking memes and make everybody know what's going on, right? So expect the next sort of like boot will come with disruption of communications, right? Because you don't want people to inform the rest of the people that there's something going on. So it's very important. Like, I love the solution that you guys have. It's like a one-button self-sovereignty server, right? So
It's a dream. I mean, yeah.
but that's the idea, right? I mean, you're running your own services.
Yeah. You can get closer and closer to it, but
Yeah, and I think I'll also echo. I think that this has been the perfect marketing for Bitcoin, which has been really great. And I think that that's where us as Bitcoiners, I agree with Matt about we really just need to have great solutions in place and a lot of education there to help these people that that maybe don't know anything about Bitcoin, but they're being woken up to what is happening in the world. And so I think that that's what we're doing, but I kind of implore everyone or encourage everyone to do is help those around you. I think that Justin in his panel earlier said that just start locally, just help onboard people locally, just explaining Bitcoin to them. And I think that giving these people that are waking up to the realities and giving them education and resources to kind of take their own steps into self-sovereignty is important for all of us. So I think that that's just, along with this perfect marketing scheme for Bitcoin, we need to really help those that aren't into Bitcoin yet learn and understand that this is a way out for them.
So you're saying we need Xiaomian banks for neighborhoods?
Yes.
Done.
Yeah, so speaking of turning off Twitter, this question is for Matt. How do we prevent that from happening? Do you think the future is federated applications that we host ourselves?
I think that's one possibility. Federation, right? P2P is another alternative. A more technically sound one, but also more difficult to implement. So for instance, a Twitter alternative that many of you might be familiar with is Mastodon, right? Mastodon is a self-hosted or self-hostable, right? NBK definitely runs one. And Mastodon, your node, people can sign up with your node, and then your node is what's called federating with other people's nodes so that you can come to a general consensus of the state of the broad system. Now, you could have pockets of inconsistency, but basically you're operating within a social network, within a larger social network, within a larger social network, and it's accurate within that state, and you hold state on your own server. So these systems exist, they are viable. One of the biggest challenges to their proliferation has been the difficulty of actually running them. Like, it's not that easy to get your computer or server, fire up a Mastodon instance.
It's a pain in the ass.
Well, not anymore.
Exactly.
Right, so that's what we're out to solve. And so we view that across the board in not just social media, but anything from Bitcoin nodes to Lightning nodes to messaging applications, is that it's been difficult, right? Self-hosting is an extremely important aspect of digital sovereignty, arguably the kind of aspect, other than holding your keys, remembering your passwords, but self-hosting your own software is kind of the essential key to the decentralized future. And it's just been hard. It's a really difficult thing to do. The people who do it well are called sysadmins. They make about $200K a year for any given company. and it's not accessible to most people. So making that accessible is priority number one. In terms of alternative social medias, I'm not super bullish on Mastodon, to be honest.
It's terrible.
Yeah, Mastodon is a proof of concept. It's been around for a long time. It's a big, bulky code base. I think it's written in Ruby on Rails. It's just not a very viable piece of software, I don't think. And it's kind of old and stale, and it's kind of, anyway, I shouldn't be trashing something we actually offer on our marketplace, but we know that better, more viable, more performant, hopefully P2P alternatives will emerge in the coming years. And what's important is that we have the ability to proliferate and distribute them with ease.
I mean, the future is balkanized, right? I mean, realistically speaking, societies are only going to become more sort of like multipolar. So, you're going to have places like Twitter, which is truly the public square, but there's limits to what they're going to tolerate there, especially because they're going to just get shit from everybody, right, from all the sides. So you're just going to progressively have more sort of like alternatives that are more like echo chambers of people that want. But it's not fun, right, to sort of meme about Trudeau on Getter, because everybody agrees, and that's truly the challenge of all this, the communications technology that's sort of the public square type, right? It's like, how do you find overlapping networks of people that don't necessarily agree with each other, sort of on the marketplace of ideas? We still don't have a good solution for that. Mastodon is interesting, but it's still not, it's not there.
Well, I think the future of Bitcoin in terms of Bitcoin's killer app is UX. It's the user experience. I think we're in the 1995 stage of the internet on Bitcoin. The internet as a protocol was rock solid, but all we needed was someone to come along and improve that user experience. I'm kind of curious for the audience, how many of you are actually working on improving that UX on Bitcoin? Just one person?
Yikes.
One person?
Agree.
2 people? Okay. Well, for everyone else, understand that user experience, ease of use, user interface, this is actually the killer app of Bitcoin. And we can't have everybody building every application from source, and we can't have everybody using command line tools. We really want the next billion users to adopt Bitcoin, and they're not maybe going to be familiar with a command line. So, thanks to Graham of Voltage, you're certainly improving that UX for anyone that wants to use Lightning. And that said, I'm curious, what do you think is the future of applications built on Lightning? Where do you think we are now, and where do you think we're headed?
Yeah, I think we're in an early stage where there's a lot of experimentation going on. Things like Sphinx Chat and the podcasting 2.0 and all of these things that are really kind of new ideas on Lightning, which are all cool to see. I think it's TBD on what makes sense to be on Lightning compared to other layers, outside of in a separate peer-to-peer network. So I think that to summarize, we're very early in the possibilities, and I think that it's great to see the experimentation happening, and that's what we're kind of we're focused on, is enabling those developers and businesses that want to explore Lightning and incorporate it to make that much easier. And so I think it's very TBD on what's gonna run on the Lightning Network in the future, and especially with all of the new things that are being worked on of DLCs on Lightning and all of this stuff. I think the jury's out on exactly what can be built, but I think that there's a lot of possibilities. I know that I think there's probably a lot of people in this room that are very opinionated on what should be on Lightning, what should not be on Lightning, and where does that fit into the stack and all of these things. And so I think, to summarize, I think it's very early, and I think that there's a lot of experimentation going on, which is awesome. And I think that we're gonna see some. I think that the first step is to really bring Lightning into the Web 2 world, if you want to use those words, of just getting rid of paywalls and making those Lightning native, and stopping the normal subscription models, and being able to pay per usage with Lightning, and all these things that are maybe not super sexy DeFi stuff, which is fine. It is integrating Bitcoin into our existing internet in a much better way, basically removing all of the fiat usage that is out there and putting Bitcoin in instead. And then I think that that's going to open up a lot of possibilities and a lot of doors immediately. And then, maybe as these other things develop, there's a lot of, new things that we aren't even really conceptualizing right now.
You don't need permission to build on Bitcoin, so it doesn't really matter what people think. Just build stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You said that NVK in Clubhouse about a year ago, and it stuck with me because I get questions all the time from folks saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I've just been relaying that incredible, I think, wisdom to everybody is that you do not need to wait until someone hires you or gives you an opportunity. You can just go out and build it. And I'm, again, curious for the audience, how many of you are building on Bitcoin or building on Lightning? So we got some builders out there. And for everyone that didn't raise their hand, like NVK said, you don't need to wait for an opportunity. You can take it. The one thing I will say, though, is if you have founded or run a Bitcoin-only company, one thing you will find is that you cannot extract wealth from people. You have to actually add value to the world. You cannot simply take it. And I think that is a challenging yet extraordinarily beautiful, dignified thing. And I think it gives us insights into the future of a Bitcoin standard in which every company is a Bitcoin company.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And it kind of, I guess, for a little bit of your earlier point, I always like to kind of pitch it as, we've all probably fallen down like this Bitcoin rabbit hole, learning about Bitcoin, understanding all of its properties. I think that you could do the same thing with Lightning. Lightning is kind of this whole second world that is almost an equal rabbit hole that's, parallel to Bitcoin's rabbit hole. So if you haven't taken that dive yet, I implore you to do that and go really check out the Lightning Network and just learn about what is this network about, what does it enable, and all of those things. Because it's if you feel like you know enough about Bitcoin, get into the Lightning Network and you'll realize you know nothing. Which is me. Like I'm still learning like every day of like new possibilities.
It's a total different thing.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the audience who has never used Lightning? Okay, well, if you guys know me, you know that I love sending sats to people, so find me or message me on Twitter and I'll send you your first Lightning payment. And I can tell you there's no better feeling than receiving your first Lightning payment. You'll never forget it. So I'm just curious for the panel, can you guys give us any cool updates on what it is you're working on? Anything you want to share? Anything you want to shill?
I'm pretty bullish on NFC.
Yes.
I think it's like it's one of those technologies that it's like near zero cost. Every phone already sort of has it. It's very low complexity, and there is a lot of products coming on the market for it. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing.
Well, the other thing is we're living in an era in which many folks don't have computers. They just have their phone. And if you're distributing Bitcoin to, say, a truck driver, chances are they might not be able to pull out a laptop and use, say, a USB device. So I'm also very bullish on NFC.
So we did a demonstration yesterday. Some of you here probably attended, where we demoed our latest software release that we have been working on for a year. Which is a lot for the team that built this. It's a massive, massive piece of software. Not unnecessarily so, it's just it needed to be big because it does a lot. And this is our latest operating system. So that's our primary product. It's not hardware, it's not even the services that run on that hardware operating system. It's the middleman. And we think it's been what's missing from open source software for all these years, right? You've always had, well, I shouldn't say always, more recently you've had, reasonably affordable commodity hardware that can do quite a bit. And you've also had this whole ecosystem of open source, self-hostable software services that nobody could run because running them required being a sysadmin. And so what's been missing is the distribution platform. How do you take this rich world of open source self-hosted software and distribute it to the masses so that everyone can use it? And what was missing was an operating system that was purpose-built for enabling an average non-technical individual to self-host their own open source software. And so that's what we build. We just relaunched our V3 version of this operating system a couple of days ago. It's awesome. We're very proud of it. So check it out. Yeah.
We're working on a lot of things that are, I guess, like early, too early to talk about. But I think that what I really like to see is just more people developing on Lightning. It seems like there's been a big rise of that in the last 6 months of people like, Stacker News, and there's like Lightning Escrow and Oshi and all these people that are really doing new things on top of Lightning, which I think are just super exciting. So I've just been really bullish on the amount of people that are starting to incorporate the technology, which I think is great to see, and I think it's a good stress test to figure out where are things working, where things aren't working, and what do we need to solve, to make it really usable for the entire world.
And Graham, with that said, if somebody wants to learn how to run their own node, is there a peer-to-peer community of Lightning node operators that have a wealth of knowledge and are extraordinarily lovely and friendly that can help anybody get started?
No, I don't think there is. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's this thing called Plebnet that definitely does exactly that. And I remember in Bitcoin 2021 last year in Miami, I met D++ at a bar, and she was like, "Okay, open up your phone and go to like kycjelly.com," and I'm like, "What the hell is this?" And it was Plebnet, and it was I think that was probably like an early stage of Plebnet, but it's this amazing community of all kinds of just people that are running nodes on the Lightning Network and are just incredibly eager to help each other learn and help everyone understand the Lightning Network and what it's like to run your own node and get up to speed with using the network. So it's I think Plebnet is an amazing resource to go and learn more about this stuff and really figure out what Lightning is all about, and also have that peer-to-peer group of people that are there to help you every step of the way. And it's been actually it's been incredibly amazing the amount of help that people just give out all kind of 24/7 in that community. So yeah, it's been great to see. So kudos D++ on that.
Yeah, they really do. And a lot of these folks, they work full-time, and then they work full-time on helping noobs with questions as if it were a full-time second job. Folks like Rajwinder and VS and Aaron are going to answer your questions for free 24/7, and they're just so generous with their time. And I'm curious for the audience, how many of you are members of Plebnet? Okay. If you haven't joined already, just go to plebnet.org, and you can join our Telegram and check out our wiki on how to get started. That said, I'm curious if there are any questions from the audience. You have a rare opportunity of 3 Bitcoin CEOs of 3 Bitcoin-only companies. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? We're going to pass the mic around, so thank you for that.
Don't let Tidwell speak.
You shat on my favorite social media platform, Mastodon, earlier, and I was wondering what peer-to-peer ideology or what architecture or what app do you currently like that isn't Mastodon? I've always thought the Mastodon idea was good because you could onboard people easily, but then you could also have the optionality of running your own stuff. But it sounded like you weren't happy with the code base, or you weren't happy with the idea, it wasn't clear. It might have just been a heap pile of crap in terms of the code, because Ruby on Rails or whatever, but are you upset with the idea of it, or just there's maybe better ideas that are more peer-to-peer? It wasn't clear to me.
So I have an instance that has about, 10,000 people. I forgot. I don't actually use it often. I'm just running it for them now. Unfortunately, the people who build that software have very specific ideology, and for example, they don't like retooting, right? Because it's like violence or something to dunk on people, it's a strange piece of software. I love the idea of federated systems. That's Web 1, by the way. The good old web was, a lot of BBS servers that were connected to each other, and you would have your IRC chats and have a great time. I hope that we go back to that model of federated. It's just that, Mastodon, like, serves a lot of people. It's just not my favorite tool, and I also don't like the stack on it. There isn't. So so Matrix is also interesting. There's also, what is it, ZeroNet? Like, there's a bunch, but the issue is this: whenever you're building something that does not have a way to be a rent seeker in the middle, there's a lot less incentives to improve that something, right? Like, there's only so much effort people are going to put into this stuff if they can't monetize it, right? So, for example, Sphinx is pretty cool, actually. I love that chat system, but it hasn't really taken off. And I think most of these networks are going to have a real hard time because the value of network comes from the size of the network, right? So whenever you have a P2P system, you have friction on top of a small network. So I think that's why we just don't see anything yet. But maybe Twitter just really go on a purge or something, and that would force us to have other tools. It's just there's just no incentives.
Okay, so I agree largely with everything you just said. Mastodon, what I said about Mastodon earlier was a personal opinion that is not actually shared by every member at Start9. And we discuss this quite often. I mean, it's on our marketplace for a reason. It's because we think it's probably the most viable present option and alternative to Twitter. And it does work. And we made it work over Tor, right? So we made it work in a way that it had never worked before by actually getting in there and messing with things. And we've been trying to get NVK to switch the Bitcoin hackers node over to Tor support, but it's not that easy, right? Because he's not running it on an embassy, which makes it Tor support, nor could he run it on an embassy because it's got 10,000 users connecting to it, and our device is not designed to...
300 gigabytes of data already.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's the gigabytes are fine. It's the bandwidth I'm worried about. It's the connections. But anyway, so it is cool and useful, and it's a good prototype, I like to think of it as. So my gripe with Mastodon, and again, it's personal, is that I just don't like it. I don't think it's a very good, useful, well-designed piece of software. So I love the idea of it. There's nothing wrong with the idea of a federated social network like Mastodon. I mean, I took a different approach a few years ago with Dr. Bones, Aiden, one of my co-founders at Start9, where for shits and giggles, we decided to build a Twitter clone on Bitcoin. And what we did was we leveraged op return and invented our own sub-protocol similar to Counterparty, such that somebody could fire off a transaction to the blockchain, it would get mined, and then a wrapper node, so you'd be running your own node that would be scanning blocks, looking for these little markers in op return, that would then parse the message, see which address it came from, consolidate it into its own feed, and this thing just looked, acted like, and basically was Twitter. Okay? The problem is that anytime you wanted to tweet something, like something, comment on a tweet, retweet, anything, it was a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Never gonna make it.
So it was like never intended to actually be a scalable thing, but if you wanted to just have a Twitter-like experience directly on the Bitcoin blockchain, which like infuriated people like Luke Dasher, right, who are just like, don't spam Bitcoin with anything except valid, purpose transactions. And so we actually launched it, again, just because this was like a project and we really wanted to like get dirty with building directly on Bitcoin. We actually launched it on Dogecoin, right? Because the transaction fees, because it's portable, they're just clones, right? So it's actually the exact same protocol. So we just unleashed it on Dogecoin where every single transaction was a single Doge. So it was basically free, and the block times were 1 minute, so it was actually pretty real time. Like we had a full-blown social network running on Dogecoin through the op return protocol for like a year, and then it obviously just fizzled out and died because nobody gave a shit. But we didn't intend for it to be anything except a hobbyist project. So anyway, that's just another approach that would never work. Mastodon is an approach that in theory could work, but just wasn't executed properly, I don't think.
There was one project that I absolutely loved, but it got abandoned, called Twister. It was actually a very interesting P2P replacement for Twitter. I don't know what happened. Maybe like it was just too good, and then the guy got hired out by Twitter or something. a lot of times that's what happens. So if anybody is like, interested in building that out, go check out that project, Twister.
Cool. I feel like, hi, I'm over here. If I had to answer that question, hi, Michael. I think it's a good question. That's actually what I wanted to answer, but I feel like Telegram is not open source, but it's a better alternative than Twitter if you're building social networks. But my question was very similar to his, but it's in terms of phones. Do you guys have a phone that you particularly like? Start 9, do you guys have a roadmap for a phone coming out?
I mean, so the phone that we tend to recommend to people who come into our channel, and our channel is very broad about digital sovereignty. It's not just like, how do I use Embassy? Like, we have a very broad, big, knowledgeable community about how to take back control of your data and communications without third parties. People come in, they ask what phone we should use. We generally tend to recommend a Pixel, either running Graphene or Calyx. Now, do we have plans for a phone? We talk about it a lot. It's not happening anytime soon, but we do recognize that if we're going to take our vision to its logical end, that ultimately we're going to have to vertically integrate through all forms of client devices. Because just because you have a server sitting in your home that itself is secure and private and yours and running open source, software on, vetted firmware, if you're connecting to it from your iPhone and your iPhone is compromised, then it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. So, encryption, client-side encryption goes a long way. Routing over Tor v3 goes a long way. But ultimately, the future must involve the proliferation of sovereign hardware devices as well. That's just a very capital-intensive game. You can't do that as an early-stage startup that's not funded.
Yeah, so phones are fully owned. You don't own your phone. The carrier has remote access to your phone, so assume they can see everything because they can see the RAM on it, so they can see you generating private keys on it. They can do whatever. Like, it's and phones are extremely complex devices. Like, if you think your computer is complicated and modern, like phones are like a marvel of technology, right? Some of them have like 17 radios on them, and for a startup to go out there and build a phone, it's tricky. First, because you're not going to be able to find any near functionality as a main manufacturers of phones. And second, because the carriers are not going to allow you in their networks either, right? It's fully integrated. Like your phone, the way it talks to the towers and everything, especially 5G, this stuff is like completely closed and proprietary. It's a shame, but on the other hand, though, we do have the beginning of like interesting technologies to just sort of like pipe our interesting secrets through their networks, right? So you can still connect your laptop that is not owned to your phone as a means of connecting to the internet and have like privacy and all these things, right? You do have some OSs for Android. There's still, the problem is the hardware is all intermingled there, right? Because you have this baseband thing that is essentially the carrier.
Is it Graphene OS, though, is the only one? Sorry.
Yeah, no, but it still doesn't matter because
Okay.
the hardware shares memory.
So what phone do you use?
I use an iPhone.
But you
he
just don't
gave
store
up.
anything on there.
No, exactly. It's like you just assume is owned, right? You can LARP around, like try
You don't
to
screenshot your private keys?
listen,
I'm just
exactly,
kidding.
right? But like, if the NSA wants to take a peek, at my chin all day, so be it, right? Like, I mean, have fun, right? But like, assume that's happening.
I don't know if I go as far as you to assume that any keystroke on my phone is visible and
They
tracked.
have
The
they have
phones are-
remote access to RAM.
I mean, okay, I don't want to. Yeah, let's talk.
Exactly.
I think it's just safe to say phones are a security hole.
Yeah, but
It's just
there is
like-
people working on having phones where there's essentially like a separation there. They're not quite there, but they will come, right? Because remember, politicians also need to send secrets to each other, right? And they're using the same hardware as us, right? So, it's the same thing with politicians owning Bitcoin, right? They are not going to put themselves in jail. So let's get politicians to do the same things as we do.
All right, are you guys good?
I don't know. Are we done?
Are you guys done?
Do you want us to be done?
Yeah, no, I want to thank our incredible panel today. It's been an honor to host 3 Bitcoin CEOs, 3 Bitcoin builders adding value to the world instead of being the monetary parasites that extracted from our own wealth. So thank you guys
You know what? Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I want to leave everyone here with just a twinge of hope here, and if it didn't come through in the rest of the panel. A lot of people question, we get this all the time, is who's going to do this shit? Who's going to run their own server? Who's going to run a Pixel phone running graphene? And like, who goes the extra mile to achieve this level of privacy and sovereignty? So let me leave you with an hypothesis that we have that I think is very, very plausible, which is that more and more people are waking up to the idea of privacy being a concern in their world, all right? So you can see this on any Apple billboard. It says privacy. The reason Apple is shilling privacy is because their marketing team has told them that that's what people want. So people want privacy more and more. And what this is causing is regulatory. Ironically, this is causing the politicians to step in and create laws that require companies to honor your privacy to some degree. Now, they want the back door, but the company still asks you, can we collect your data? So more and more now, you're noticing that if you open up an app and it says, can we monitor you? Who says yes? Do you know anyone who says yes? You do? Okay. Everyone says no, right? So what does that mean? It means that the revenue streams of the past 2 decades of SaaS software, data mining and monetizing it out the back door to advertisers is going to start shrinking, and it's ultimately going to dry up as the privacy tools increase. How are they going to backfill those revenues? Subscriptions. Everything on your phone is about to start becoming more and more expensive. Every app is going to be $5 a month, then $10 a month, until you're getting nickel and dimed out of your ability to pay rent. So what's ultimately going to happen here is the adoption of self-sovereign technology is not going to be driven by ideology of privacy and sovereignty, and it's going to be driven by cost. We're going to make it a lot cheaper.